story name Haunted Motel 101, shared by Mad Zebra. My name's Henry. I spent 5 years as the night clerk at an old motel I randomly found. The owner, Margot, was a lively older woman, full of energy even though her hair was practically white and her face permanently wore a kind of tight smile. She showed me the ropes in her back office. This place had been built in the 60s and been in her family forever. Right off Highway 88, it wasn't the usual type of motel for families on vacation. It mainly catered to drifters, folks on their own, people running from something, the less fortunate kind of crowd. I was freshly single at the time, driving along a lonely highway in the dead of night with hardly any money and an empty belly. The motel's flickering vacancy sign was like a beacon. I crashed on one of their scratchy beds and slept better than I had in ages. Margot reminded me of my grandma. She seemed nice enough when we met. Then I saw the hiring sign and it stuck with me. That's how I ended up taking the job. Waking up, I didn't want to leave that motel. Something pulled at me, like an invisible string in my chest. Margot gave me a lifeline, really, as I was scraping by. We settled on a wage and I signed on the spot, starting right then. But before I could get up, Margot grabbed my wrist. Her hands were surprisingly cold and wrinkled. "Henry," she said with a shaky voice, "there's something more you should know about this place." She fished out a yellowed, crumpled piece of paper from her fanny pack and slid it across the desk. Intrigued, I leaned forward. "What's this?" She unfolded it nervously. "Rules, Henry. To keep you safe. Things happen here, best to be prepared." "Keep me safe?" The words echoed in my head. What did she mean? The paper listed 5 eerie guidelines, scribbled in Margot's shaky hand. "A puppeteer comes at midnight. Don't ask about his puppets and obey him. Room 47 is off limits. Never book it. No leaving the motel after 3 a.m. Never open the front door for anyone. It's always unlocked for guests. If the puppeteer comes alone, hide in the cellar until your shift ends." I couldn't keep a straight face. "Margot, are you serious?" Her head bowed, pushing up her thick glasses. Her usual cheerful tone's gone, replaced by a grave seriousness. "I'm afraid so, Henry. Folks didn't heed these, and well, let's just say things didn't end well. You seem decent. I hope you find what you seek, but trust me on this." Her earnestness sunk in. She meant it. "All right, Margot. Don't worry," I said, despite the goosebumps crawling up my arms. She nodded grimly. "Good. See you tonight, son." Then she headed back to the front desk where a couple impatiently tapped their foot. The light-hearted mood was gone, replaced by an unsettling premonition. Something strange was definitely happening at this motel. I chilled in my Civic until sunset. It had been my whole world since Anna left 6 months back. I reread the job rules again and again, making sure they were seared into my brain. One thought kept buzzing: who was really in charge of this place? I had a stack of questions for Margot. As twilight fell, I headed towards the motel, ready to start work at 8 p.m. A chilly desert wind whipped through as cars zoomed down Highway 88. Inside, Margot looked pale and worn out at the front desk. "Hey Margot, you look a bit off. Feeling all right?" "Just a touch of the jitters, dear. Nothing new," she said with her piercing blue eyes. "Some nights are tougher than others." She stood up from her creaky chair, grabbed her coat. "Call if you need anything. Henry. See you sharp at 7 a.m. She vanished out into the desert night, her dress billowing in the wind. The motel itself was a sight old-fashioned and kinder like a run-down Victorian castle. Peeling wallpaper, roaches darting under thick rugs, flickering dim lights, and that overwhelming mothball smell hit me hard. Who'd willingly stay here? I thought. But strangely, it felt kinda like home to me. For hours, nobody showed up. Just 2 guests, the couple from my morning meeting with Margot, and someone in room 46. That was it. The place was mostly deserted. Those long nights at the desk felt endless. My phone was my lifeline, just trying to stay awake while the hours dragged by. A little past 10 p.m., the main line rang. "Hello, front desk," I mumbled, clearing my throat. A gruff voice came on. "A man in room 46. The people next door, room 47, are throwing a racket, stumping and moving furniture like crazy." "It's right next to me. You know the walls. Here ain't much." I glanced at our key rack. Room 47 brass key was still there. "Sir, I'm sorry, but room 47 is empty." "You sure that's where it's coming from?" "Dead sure," he insisted. "Ear practically on the wall, can't miss it." I strained to listen, but heard nothing. "Look, I don't hear anything, but I promise you room 47 unoccupied. I have the only key and it's right here." The guy went quiet for a beat. "You absolutely sure, man?" "I am," I said, my voice shaking a little. He sighed. "All right then, well, good night." He hung up, leaving me with a churning stomach full of unease. Like trapped butterflies trying to escape. My eyes darted to the motel rules Margot had given me. Rule number 2 jumped out: room 47 must never be booked. My head was spinning. What in the world was that guy hearing? Part of me wanted to check the room, but I forced myself to stay put. What if a paying guest showed up? The minutes crawled by, phone my only comfort in the dim light. Just as I lifted my head and stretched, a figure outside the front window caught my eye. Cowering, cloaked in a long black trench coat that swallowed his whole frame, his head cocked at an odd angle. No clear features, just a shadow. He seemed to be carrying something. It lay on the floor beside him. A heavy thud echoed as he rapped on the glass. He tapped again and then slowly pushed the door open. He moved like he was on stilts, at least 7 feet tall. The trench coat draped over his whole body. A dusty top hat perched atop his head. Stringy blonde hair fell across a pale face with disturbingly feline-like eyes sunk deep in their sockets. He dragged something wooden across the floor as he lumbered towards me, and my grip on my chair tightened as pure panic welled up inside. The man slowly brought something from behind his back, a wooden doll, about the same size as a little kid. He placed it on my desk, its limbs flopping uselessly at its sides. In a flash, I recognized it, a creepy puppet of myself, complete with my beat-up white shirt, black swim trunks, and red baseball cap. The lifeless wooden face stared back, and my blood ran cold. Towering over me, the man cast a huge shadow on the wall. A twisted grin spread across his sharp, pointy face, revealing rows of yellow teeth chipped and cracked with dried blood. He reached up the doll's back and, in a high-pitched voice, made its mouth move. "Room 47, please," the puppet uttered. Goosebumps erupted all over me. I couldn't even speak, frozen in fear. He moved like a marionette himself, controlled with unnatural grace. The Henry doll squeaked again. "Room 47, please." and pointed at the key rack with its wooden arm. My voice caught. Sorry, room 47 taken, I stammered, desperately flipping through the guest list rules. The man cocked his head, his burning auburn eyes boring into me. He turned to the doll, mirroring its movement, and the puppet's wooden lips whispered, "I would like a room, please." The man nodded in agreement. Against my better judgment, I said, "Sure," and slid over the chair to the key rack. Desperately searching for a vacant room far from other guests, I found room 72 at the end of the row. Handing the key to the puppeteer, he looked at me, confused, as if expecting the doll to speak. The Henry puppet sat lifeless, its faded colors and loose-hanging mouth hollow and empty. With a sly giggle, he tucked the doll under his long trench coat and turned for the door. "That's $1.65 for the night," he said. I felt cheated, shaken down. He stopped, his hunched figure rigid as if time itself had paused. Slowly, he turned, pushing back stringy hair from his face. A sickening smile spread again, revealing those unnervingly perfect yellow teeth. My throat constricted, palms sweated, and my head pounded. He tossed a few bills on the floor and vanished into the dark, windy night. The rest of the night was smooth sailing. As dawn broke, an old clunker pulled up with Margot at the wheel, a box of donuts in hand. She caught me at the desk, asked how things were, and I filled her in about the guy complaining from room 47. Margot said that room usually acted up, but not this intense, especially during the day. When she pressed about the puppeteer, my hesitation was clear. She offered a donut and wouldn't let up on what the puppet man had wanted. I told her he'd come in with a puppet of me and asked for a room, so I gave him room 72. He actually wanted room 47 first, though I remembered. Margot chomped on her donut, her eyes widening. "He never does that." She scrambled behind the desk, digging through a cabinet, making me nervous. "Hey, I followed the rules, didn't book him in there," I said, feeling a bit defensive. "But he asked for it." Margot snapped back, pulling out a beat-up blowtorch. "What the heck is that?" I blurted out. Margot sighed. "Look, I should have explained better. The rules get weird sometimes." Always listen to the puppeteer. Didn't expect him throwing curveballs on your first night. "So, what do we do now?" Fear pricked at me. "Come with me," Margot said, striding down the hall like she was leading a rescue mission. I trailed behind, the wonky patterned carpet making my head spin. We stopped in front of room 47. "We're going in, gotta find out what's in there and burn it. That's the only way." "Find what?" I asked as she fumbled with the key. She burst through the door. The room was dim, dusty, reeking something awful. Margot aimed the torch, a blue flame illuminating the walls. A shadow of a painted figure flickered. Holding onto her shoulder, my phone's flashlight beam danced around the room, landing on the bed. There, a doll me sat facing the wall, head turned away. Its worn-out face and open jaw seemed to stare at nothing. We cautiously approached. Margot held the torch ready. Then, everything went silent. A ringing filled my ears, pressure building like when the puppeteer left before. The doll's head slowly turned, its wooden joints creaking, until it met our gaze. Margot, without warning, seared the doll with the flame. We stood bathed in the blue light, sweat pouring as the doll of me erupted in flames, head still spinning. It collapsed into a burning heap. Margot pulled me out, slammed the door shut. I felt a jolt, like someone shoved a red-hot coal down my throat. Holy crap, it's still on fire. This whole motel is going to go up. I panicked, staring at the orange glow flickering under the door, like a pulse of light in the darkness. The flames raged for a bit, then died down, plunging us back into shadow. The ringing in my ears finally vanished. There, Margot panted. Should take care of it for now. We went back to the front desk, where the box of donuts sat untouched. Margot grinned and said, "Come on, Henry. Let's talk a sec first." "I know you're tired, but this'll just be a quick chat." We walked into her back office, and my head was exploding with questions. And this was all from the first night. Leaving Margot's place that morning, my head and body ached like I'd been run over. Slurping a donut, I walked to my car in the already scorching desert sun. It was parked alone in the empty lot, the constant hum of traffic on Highway 88 a soundtrack. The air smelled of dusty salt, soaking into me as the sun tanned my skin. Margot let me stay in one of her motel rooms for some much-needed repairs. The place was a mess. Over the weeks, I felt closer to Margot. We'd swap stories about our pasts, loves and adventures, finding comfort in each other's company. She felt like a safe harbor after Anna had broken my heart. My night shifts at the motel settled into a routine, even with the creepy stuff. Pictures flying off the walls, whispers in the halls, glimpses of shadowy figures. It was all unsettlingly familiar. Margot seemed chill about it, but I was still spooked. Then there was the guy in the trench coat. He'd tap on the window at night, this long, dark figure. Sometimes he'd ask for a room, directions. Once he even wanted a vodka, which I luckily had stashed away. But when I brought him a glass, he vanished. Margot and I figured he wasn't human, something else entirely. He didn't eat or drink, and we weren't even sure he'd breathed. We knew he was tied to the motel, and messing with things would bring bad luck. He was a constant unnerved presence, but routine-like in his strangeness. The weirdest rule, though, was number 4 never open the front door for anyone, even though it'd always be unlocked for guests. That one always twisted my gut. It was around 6 months after I started working there that something strange happened for the first time. The puppeteer had been bothering me for a while, but then his visits became less frequent. That's when the wanderers started showing up. Margot calls them that because they just wander around and beg to come in. If you don't let them inside, they won't bother you. One night, Paul, a young man who worked there for 3 weeks, was flipping through a nudie magazine at the desk. A blonde woman knocked on the glass front door. Margot told me that she called out to Paul, begging him to let her in. Overconfident, he went over with the rules in hand and opened the door. The camera stopped recording right after, but it showed Paul opening the door for this young blonde lady. Margot came back early the next morning and found Paul lying in a pool of his own blood. His chest was torn out, red scattered like twisted art. Margot was pretty upset about that one, but she couldn't leave the place because her family had owned it for generations. I wish she was here when my first wanderer showed up. During winter, the motel gets very quiet. Cold desert winds blow and howls of coyote packs fill the air. On this particular night, there was only one guest, a bulky, middle-aged man with lots of tattoos who seemed like a biker. I sat at the desk working on a Sudoku puzzle when, out of nowhere, something crashed above me. I got dust and plaster all over from the noise. Angry, I grabbed a wooden baseball I kept behind the counter and went upstairs to confront the guy since he hadn't left after checking in. There was only one way into or out of the motel. Open up. What in the world was that? I banged on the door, and it creaked open slowly. Stepping back, I called out into the pitch-black room, "Hello." A faint draft whispered from within. My grip on my baseball bat tightened as tension coiled in me, expecting a burly biker to erupt at any second. I barely heard the tiny bell chime over the pounding in my ears. Urgency pulling at me like a magnet, I retreated to the lobby. Empty. Nothing. The place felt so eerie it was messing with my head. As I went to sit, another bone-jarring crash echoed from above, showering me in dust and plaster. "That's it," I yelled. Out of nowhere, a figure materialized at the doorway of the biker. He stood frozen behind the glass door, an unnervingly still statue. He reached out with a massive hand to the handle, and I desperately hoped he could open it. Our eyes met as beady ones fixed on mine as his trembling fingers strained against the knob. "Henry," he rasped, voice uncharacteristically high-pitched. "Henry, the door won't budge. Please let me in." My stomach lurched like a roller coaster drop. Seeing the pulsating veins in his neck, I just stood silent. He implored again, more pitifully, "Henry, it's freezing out here, please." I slowly made my way to the desk, never losing sight of my bat. The main phone rang, and the biker darted away from the door, a chilling giggle echoing behind him. "Front desk, how can I help you?" I forced out, "What's the holdup with room service?" "I'm bloody starving," he demanded. My mind reeled. Was this a dream? "Hello, anyone there?" I said. "What's the deal with room service? Is there any food downstairs?" Shakily, I replied, "Yeah, sorry about that." "There's a vending machine on the second floor, if you like." "A flipping vending machine? You've got to be kidding me." He slammed the phone down, a deranged giggle cutting through before the dial tone returned. Staring at the receiver, a shiver shot down my spine. The rest is a blur. A head slumped on the desk, a jolt of awakening, and then shattered glass. I leaped up just as someone was dashing away. One of the glass doors had a huge hole smashed into it. Without thinking, I bolted toward the door and watched as the figure vanished into the night. It felt instinctive. I chased after them into the desert. Wish I'd looked at my watch. It must have been past 3 a.m. When you're exhausted, your reactions aren't as sharp. All I could do was react to whoever messed up the motel I worked so hard to maintain. There are a few things in life I regret and mistakes I've made, but mostly I learn from them. This one taught me a tough lesson. As I ventured deeper into the darkness, my chances of catching anyone faded fast. Standing there alone under the stars with just the dim lights of the motel behind me, I felt tiny against the vast desert. But that moment of curiosity was interrupted by someone calling out in the dark. "Henry," a woman's voice called. "Henry." A man shouted louder, "I am here." I yelled back, confused as voices echoed from all directions. Men, women, and children were shouting my name. My head spun with confusion and pressure as the cries grew louder, like they were invading my mind. Pain shot through me, teeth clenched tight. Suddenly, a car's headlights flashed on, breaking through the chaos. Margot rushed out of it to help me up and into the vehicle. Behind us, people stood motionless in the dark. She drove back toward the motel with me crammed inside. As we pulled away, I saw the leader standing tall among them. Margot and I were sitting on the floor of the motel lobby at 4:15 a.m. when she looked disappointed at me. "I'm sorry, Margot," I said. "I didn't realize how late it was because I was so tired." But did you see someone trying to get in? She turned away from me and rubbed her forearm gently. Are you okay? I asked, putting my hands on her shoulders softly. Margot lifted her sleeve to show a long red burn mark on her thin arm, with black and red veins visible beneath it. When I touched the spot lightly, she winced in pain. When I came back free, one of them got me, she explained. Did you see the puppeteer? I asked. She nodded. I saw him too. Margot looked down, her face serious. He definitely saw me. And when I tried to get away, a wanderer grabbed my arm. It felt like being stabbed with a hot poker. A young girl with straight brown hair and coal-black eyes had stopped her in the crowd. I got free and came back here, Margot continued. I've never seen so many wanderers before. Something feels really wrong. Me too, Margot. Me too. We stayed there until my shift ended, with Margot resting her head on my shoulder. She was nursing her injured arm as the sun rose over Highway 88, making me realize it would be a hot day. After that night, things were never the same between us. I wish we hadn't gone out then. The Wanderer incident really shook Margot harder than me. The burn on her arm never truly healed, always feeling fresh even weeks and months later. She couldn't sleep, constantly waking in a panic, convinced someone was watching from outside. It all reached a breaking point one scorching summer night. Spring and winter passed in a blur as more and more people used the long Highway 88, bringing more guests to our motel. Margot and I worked well together. She trusted me, and I was eternally grateful for saving me when those wanderers cornered me. That night, I'd felt on the edge of something terrible, like my rope was about to snap. The summer heat brought out tensions, fighting couples, their angry outbursts echoing in the halls. I spent countless times de-escalating situations and stopping them from causing a scene. I'd constantly walk past room 47, feeling it stare back at me, a hidden oddity in the messy motel. Margot never mentioned it, and after her encounter with the Wanderers, I learned not to ask. She'd become withdrawn, lost in the desert expanse around us, just staring out into the neon-lit night as if seeing something or being watched. Wanderer sightings became more common after my own close call. Margot figured it was somehow linked to me. She kept a watchful eye on me, for which I'm forever thankful. One night, flipping through a car magazine at the desk, I felt a growing urge to leave. The pull of this place, once so strong, had faded. It was like I no longer belonged. A movement in my peripheral vision made me look up and see him, the puppeteer, tall and lanky in his trench coat. He tapped on the door before entering, his movements stiff and unnatural, just like a puppet's. The familiar pressure built in my head as he always seemed to bring. He reached behind his back, and instead of another random puppet, revealed one of Margot, a perfect doll replica, right down to her white hair, thick glasses, and the yellow polka dot dress she wore every Friday. He placed it on the table, and the doll's head turned to me, its wooden lips forming Margot's voice, "Hello, Henry." Frozen, I couldn't speak. The puppeteer stared with his burning eyes, while the doll continued, "Come join us, Henry." "What did you say?" I shot back, anger rising inside me. The doll echoed, "Join us, Henry, come, join us." My frustration, bottled up for months, exploded. I slammed my fist on the desk, a vein throbbing in my forehead. The puppeteer met my gaze like a predator, motionless and dangerous. "Calm down, son. Sit back," the doll chided. Seething, I blurted out, "Why do you have her?" A wicked grin spread on his face, making me feel like I'd done something terribly wrong. He erupted in a maniacal laughter that filled the air, and as he doubled over, I grabbed the doll and hurled it towards the door. The puppeteer howled with glee. "Out!" I screamed, my voice raw. He froze, his rigid body a statue before a darkness seemed to descend upon him. Something felt deeply wrong. As he lunged, teeth bared, the motel's power went out in a flash. A gust of wind rushed past me, then the lights flickered back on. The puppeteer vanished. Shaking and heart-pounding, I sank into the chair, tracing Margot's yellowed note with my fingers. Rereading the rules, one detail slammed into me: don't ask about his puppets. At 12:32 p.m. it hit me I had broken the rule by asking about the Margot doll. The phone on the desk began to ring. An instinct screamed at me not to answer. I let it ring and ring again, a sliver of relief washing over me each time it stopped, only for it to start anew. This terrifying cycle repeated for hours, my gut urging me to silence the insistent calls. When an hour passed by, with the haunting ring of the phone blasting on, I finally caved in. "Hello, front desk." "How can I help you?" I answered sarcastically. "That's no way to greet a guest, Henry," Shame Margot responded. Shaken, I fumbled the words out. "Margot. Was that you calling all this time?" "I've been trying to reach you for a minute now, sir. I'm in room 47 and I can't seem to work the TV." "Would you mind coming in to help?" Margot responded. Margot's voice sounded different, more robotic. I hesitated on the phone. "Margot, why are you in room 47? You're not supposed to be in there." Margot's cheery voice sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh dearie, but you booked me the room before. Now please, I want to keep watching my stories. Oh, won't you please help?" "Sure, I'll be right up," swallowing the large thump in my throat. "Thank you, son." "Oh, by the way, Henry, you should follow more closely." Margot hung up the phone with a frantic giggle. I sat wide-eyed, tears were bubbling in my eyes. I feverishly called Margot's cell. Each call went straight to voicemail. Rustlings started coming from above me. Thin flakes of plaster rained down upon me. The blowtorch sat under the desk ready to go. The motel was loud that night. There seemed to be more guests in the rooms than I had remembered. Lights flickered down the halls as I made my way to room 47. Out of the corner of my eyes, I would catch a glimpse of a shadow walking. Outside each window, a person stood staring at me, watching me head towards the room. That sinking feeling in my stomach cascaded on. I felt like I was going to throw up. As I stood in front of room 47, which was covered in dust and already smelling like rotten roadkill, I touched the doorknob and to my despair it twisted right open. I held my breath and gripped the blowtorch tight, as Margot did once upon a time. The room was dark. Particles of dust lingered in the air. I closed the door behind me, shutting me off from the noisy motel. I flicked on the blowtorch, sending a hot stream of blue flames into the air. That same ominous shadow drew on the wall before me. I held my phone flashlight up high, where I saw the same Margot doll from before. Laying on the bed. I carefully walked towards it, feeling the sweat racing down my brow. The doll laid flat on the bed, limbs outstretched. The floor creaked under me and Margot doll shot straight up. Startled, I nearly stumbled back. I rested my flashlight on the dresser and prepared the torch. The doll screeched as its wooden limbs came to life. It slowly rose on the bed, its ominous head turning to face me. The dry lump in my throat bulged tightly. I watched as the doll rose before me, rising higher in the air. I went to fire off the blowtorch, but nothing came. I tried, and tried again to light the blowtorch as the Margot doll levitated before me. Whispers filled the air, my fingers nervously unable to light the torch. I fumbled with it where it slipped from my fingers and rolled under the musty mattress. The whispering grew louder. Too late Henry, the Margot doll, spoke in a deep, thunderous tone. It stood floating before me in the darkness, my eyes struggling to adjust in the dimness. "Who's there?" I questioned nervously. A figure emerged from behind the doll. The puppeteer revealed himself from the darkness, his hand up the back of the Margot doll. "She's one of us now," the puppeteer spoke in his deep, gravelly voice. The Margot doll nodded in agreement. "No. Please, what have you done with her?" I begged, dropping to the floor. The puppeteer seemed to grow the size of the room, his dark presence looming over me. "We grow stronger, Henry. Come, take my hand." "Never." I screamed, bolting for the door. It struggled to open it. The pressure was rising in my ears. The doll dropped to the floor, sounding like someone dropped a pile of logs. I screamed out for help, pounding on the door. My screams were cut short when the sounds of tiny footsteps came from within the darkness. I pounded on the door as the footsteps carefully drew closer. With a final kick, I burst into the hallway. Flies and moths fluttered out from within the room. My ears were ringing, like someone fired a shotgun next to my head. I struggled to stand as I watched the door to room 47 slam close, giggling coming from within the darkness. The pressure in my head began to drop, yet that sinking feeling in my stomach only seemed to fall further. I raced to the front desk, passing by windows where wanderers stood outside, all following me. I grabbed my keys from my jacket and raced towards my car. The desert winds hit me like a cyclone. It felt like a tornado was blowing through. Under the light of one street lamp in the parking lot, my car sat planted. Wanderers, hundreds of them, filled the parking lot. I raced through the crowd of motionless people towards my car. Silent lightning cracked overhead. A storm was brewing. I got in my car, closing me in from the perilous winds. The wanderers surrounded my vehicle, pressing their bodies against it. They didn't want me to leave. With fear and frustration coursing through me, I had to get to Margot's house somehow. I pressed on the gas and ran through the crows of wanderers without a second thought. Bodies sprawled across my windshield, flying off the car. Their bodies would let out a sickening crunch as I ran them over. I finally burst through the crowd, my car covered in light sprays of blood, and headed down the dirt path towards Margot's trailer. In the distance, where Margot's trailer was parked, I could already make out the blue and red flashes of police and ambulances. My heart ached with a newfound pain I had not experienced since. I pressed on the gas and raced towards Margot, hoping it wasn't too late. With the growing crowd of wanderers behind me and the flashing of sirens ahead of me, my head was swimming with anxiety. Margot had lived in a small trailer out in the desert, not too far from the motel. Very secluded and very quiet. There were 3 cop cars and an ambulance when I pulled up. The trailer was surrounded by yellow police tape. I pulled up to an officer. He flinched, seeing the desperate fear strewn across my face. "Please, officer, I'm her son. What happened here?" "You're her son. Please come with me." The officer and I walked towards another squad car. The officer grabbed me by the shoulder, like a father would. Highway 88 was quiet, one of the only times I can recall total silence out here. My mind blocked a lot of the pain that night, Only a few things stood out from our conversation before it hit me like a sucker punch. "Your mother, she has passed, sir," the officer said with a gloomy look on his face. My stomach dropped, knowing what had come. Margot had come so far. A streak of silent lightning crashed across the sky. A cold pellet of water splashed onto my face. "How, officer? What the hell happened? I just saw her this morning," I pleaded. "That's when I saw them wheeling her out of the trailer." Zipped up in a black body bag, 2 paramedics wheeled her over to the ambulance. I darted towards them, huffing and puffing. "Hey, get back," the officer yelled. I collapsed into the paramedic's arms, heavy the whole time. "Please let me see her." The 2 paramedics looked at one another, then back to the officer, who just shrugged his shoulders. With tears racing down my face, the paramedics slowly unzipped the body bag. Margot's cheery smile and thick-brimmed glasses were no more. Where her face used to be was nothing more than a melted, searing pile of black, dead skin, like someone had taken a blowtorch to her face. Her skin was red and purple as if someone squeezed her limbs tight, cutting off all circulation. She smelled like smoldering roadkill. I threw up my lunch to the side. The paramedic sipped her back up. The officer lightly tapped me on the shoulder. "Please, son, we'll need to ask you a few questions. Can you talk right now?" "No, not right now." "I can't. Please," I replied. "That's all right, son. Take the night. We can talk first thing in the morning." With how I was looking at it, there wasn't going to be another morning. I was prepared to die that night. I wiped the tears from my eyes, got one last look at Margot in the body bag, and headed to my car, the cover of darkness concealing my blood-stained car from the officer. I pressed on the gas, sending a cloud of sand into the air, and peeled off towards the motel. Rain was pouring down as the neon lights of the motel came into view. I reached into my glove box and pulled out a sheathed 9-inch knife I kept with me. When you lived in your car for as long as I had, you needed a way to protect yourself. As the motel grew closer, the crowd of wanderers came into view. Motionless, they stood in masses around the motel, completely surrounding it. With rage coursing through my body, I parked the car and headed towards the ghostly crowd with my knife in tow. I came up to the closest wanderer and plunged the knife into his back. He was a tall, wiry man. The knife went in deep, sending a trickle of blood racing down his back. The wanderer collapsed onto the floor like a sack of potatoes. Onto the next, I thought, feeling my teeth grind against themselves. I stabbed a woman right in the neck. Spurts of blood sprayed across my face. I hacked and slashed wanderer after wanderer, making my way through the crowd towards the main door. They all dropped, quicker than I imagined, like they were rag dolls barely being held up. Their lifeless corpses appeared frozen in time. As I pushed through, a wanderer reached out and grabbed my arm. A sharp, burning sensation pierced into me. I looked up at the man whose eyes were as black as coals. I shoved the knife into his dark eye socket, blood spraying into my mouth. I twisted and yanked the knife till he collapsed. My rage was fuming. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I tried to ignore the searing pain in my arm, drawing closer to the main door. I pushed aside wanderers. Another one grabbed me on the leg. That same searing pain radiated through me instantly. I hacked at the woman, slashing her across the face till she buckled. Then another arm grabbed me, followed by another arm, and another. They pinned me to the ground. Masses of people held me down. My body felt like I was being stung by hundreds of deadly jellyfish. I bit down hard on my tongue, feeling the metallic taste of blood seep down my throat. I hacked furiously at the wanderers holding me down. Like a crazed banshee, I unloaded onto them until I was able to stand back. I limped towards the front door, my body growing numb. I was painted in blood, seeing my crimson body reflected in the glass front door. Standing in front of the door, a woman stood alone. I watched around me, seeing the wanderers circle around us, boxing me in, as if they were waiting for a fight to start. As I walked closer, the woman before me revealed herself to be Margot. I collapsed to my knees before her. She stood motionless as a statue, her eyes as black as the night sky. Her arms seemed to pulsate with each breath. She looked down at me, nothing human about her coal-black eyes. I whimpered, tugging at her dirty yellow dress. "Please, no," I cried. Margot raised her hand and placed it on my face. My face burned like someone planted an iron onto me. I smelt the burning of my hair and skin. I pulled back, feeling pieces of my flesh peel off, sticking to Margot's hand. She walked over to me like a robot. I was shrieking in pain, barely able to see. I held the knife out in front of me. As Margot drew closer, I thrusted the knife into her belly. My head was spinning. Margot stood before me, blood trickling out of the knife wound, her shadowy eyes meeting mine. I slipped the knife in up to the handle and started pulling down. Margot came down with each pull I did. Blood surged out of her like a dam opening. The pinks of her intestines spilled out over my hands. I fell backwards, staring up at the constellations as rain poured over me. Margot fell face forward, landing in a wet slap on the knife as it was thrust into her belly further, puncturing her through her back. Her dead face met mine. A sick smile was drawn across it. I lay there for a while. One by one the wanderers faded into the dark desert. I laid as the cool rain washed the blood over me. I held Margot's hand as the night drew on. I don't know when, but at some point, I must have fallen asleep. I awoke to the bright morning sun above me. The hard floor under me, my back ached horribly. I was caked with blood, and my skin was scabbed and torn all over my face. I felt sore all over. I looked to my side where Margot once laid to find her gone. All that remained was the knife I used to kill her, dull and bloody from a long night's work. With Margot gone, a light seemed to blow out from my heart. My already fragile heart, built up by Margot, only to be crushed by whatever the hell inhabits these lands. In the next few weeks, I was able to find answers to some of the motel's problems. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.